The amber glow of sunset painted the horizon as Eliza Norwood stared through the dust-streaked windowpane, her slender fingers absently tracing the frayed edges of a telegram that had arrived 3 days prior. News of her father's death had traveled faster than the stagecoach that had brought her to this remote outpost in Montana Territory. It was 1876, and at 22, she found herself alone in the world, with nothing but a small inheritance and her father's trading post to her name. The trading post sat on the outskirts of Silver Creek, a town that had sprung up during the Silver Rush 5 years earlier, but was now barely hanging on as the mines slowly dried up. The main street was little more than a stretch of rutted dirt lined with weathered buildings, a saloon, general store, blacksmith, and a handful of other establishments necessary for frontier survival. Eliza had arrived just yesterday, and already she felt the weight of her decision pressing down upon her. The trading post her father had written about so enthusiastically in his letters was a far cry from the thriving business he had described. The shelves were half empty, the ledger showed more debts than profits, and the building itself seemed to sag with weariness. As the last light of day faded, Eliza lit the oil lamp on the table beside her. She hadn't moved from the window seat all evening, watching as the town settled into its nightly routine. The saloon across the way had come alive with piano music and raucous laughter, while the rest of the street gradually darkened as businesses closed for the night. The knock was so gentle at first that Eliza thought she had imagined it. Then it came again, barely louder than the first time. Rising from her perch, she wrapped her woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders and moved cautiously toward the door. Through the small window, she could make out the silhouette of a man, tall and broad-shouldered, his hat in his hands. "Who's there?" she called, her voice steadier than she felt. "Yates Richmond, madam," came the reply, deep and unhurried. "I was a friend of your father's." "Heard you arrived yesterday." Eliza hesitated, her hand on the latch. Her father had mentioned a Yates in his letters, a cowboy who occasionally supplied the trading post with goods from his small ranch outside of town. With a deep breath, she opened the door just enough to see his face. He stood respectfully back from the threshold, his hat clutched in work-worn hands. The lamplight caught the sharp angles of his face, strong jaw, straight nose, and eyes the color of a summer storm. He couldn't have been more than 30, but the lines around his eyes and the weathered quality of his skin spoke of a man who had lived much of his life under the open sky. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Miss Norwood," he said, his voice gentle. "I just wanted to pay my respects." "Your father was a good man." "Thank you," Eliza replied, uncertain what else to say. She was painfully aware of her rumpled traveling dress and loosened hair. She'd been too wrapped up in her thoughts to bother with appearances. "I also wanted to make sure you had everything you needed," he continued. "These first days can be the hardest." The unexpected kindness in his voice nearly undid her composure. She'd been holding herself together with sheer will since receiving the telegram, refusing to let grief overwhelm her. "That's very kind of you, Mr. Richmond," she managed. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, looking briefly at the darkening sky before turning back to her. "Can I sit a while? I could tell you about your father if you'd like, or just provide some company." "It's not good for anyone to be alone with fresh grief." Eliza hesitated only briefly before opening the door wider. "Please come in." Yates stepped inside, his tall frame making the modest room seem smaller. He moved with a quiet grace that belied his size, carefully setting his hat on the hook by the door where her father would have placed his own. "Would you like some tea?" Eliza offered, suddenly remembering her manners. "That would be nice, thank you," he said, standing awkwardly until she gestured toward the small table with 2 chairs. As Eliza busied herself with the kettle and stove, she was acutely aware of his presence. There was something solid and reassuring about him, like an oak tree that had weathered many storms. "How did you know my father?" she asked, needing to fill the silence. "I came to Silver Creek about 4 years ago," Yates began, his voice warming with memory. Had nothing but my horse, saddle, and the clothes on my back. Your father gave me credit at the trading post when no one else would, helped me get started with my small spread just north of here. I paid him back, of course, but I never forgot his kindness. Eliza nodded, unsurprised. That sounded like her father, always willing to see the good in people, to give them a chance. He talked about you all the time, Yates continued, watching as she set the cups on the table. Was mighty proud of his daughter back east with her education and refined ways. A lump formed in Eliza's throat. He wanted me to join him here for years. I always found a reason to stay in Boston. Now I wish I hadn't waited so long. He understood, Yates said gently. He knew this life wasn't for everyone. And yet here I am, Eliza said with a weak smile, pouring the tea, trying to figure out what to do with a failing trading post in the middle of nowhere. Yates accepted the cup with a nod of thanks. It wasn't always failing. Your father did good business until the mines started to play out. These days, it's mostly the ranchers and farmers who keep things going. Like yourself, Eliza noted, taking a seat across from him. My place is small compared to some, but I get by. He took a sip of tea. Miss Norwood, I don't mean to pry, but do you have plans for the trading post, I mean? Eliza sighed, looking around at the shelves of merchandise. I'm not sure. I could sell it, I suppose, though I doubt it would fetch much in its current state, or I could try to revive it somehow. She met his gaze directly. What would you suggest, Mr. Richmond? Yates, please, he said. And I think there's still a place for this trading post in Silver Creek. Your father had a good eye for what people needed. He just ran into some hard times at the end. As they talked, Eliza found herself studying Yates Richmond. There was an openness to his face that invited trust, and despite her initial caution, she found herself sharing her concerns about her future in this rugged place. The truth is, she confessed, I know nothing about running a trading post. My father wanted me to have opportunities he never had, so he sent me to school in Boston. I can recite Shakespeare and play the piano, but I can't tell you the fair price for a pound of coffee out here. You can learn, Yates said simply, and folks around here would help you. Your father was well liked. The confidence in his voice gave Eliza pause. Could she really do this? Stay in this wild place and build a life for herself? Thank you for coming by, Yates, she said finally. It helps hearing about my father from someone who knew him these past years. It's the least I could do, he replied, setting down his empty cup. And I meant what I said about helping. I bring beef and hides into town regularly. I could stop by, maybe give you some advice about local prices and such. I'd appreciate that, Eliza said, surprised by how much she meant it. As Yates rose to leave, he looked at her with those storm-gray eyes. Your father believed in this place, Miss Norwood. He believed in the people here. Maybe give it some time before you decide what to do. After he left, Eliza returned to her seat by the window. But instead of the empty feeling that had plagued her all day, she found herself contemplating possibilities. Perhaps there was a future for her here after all. The next morning dawned clear and crisp, the early October air carrying a hint of the winter to come. Eliza rose with the sun, determined to take stock of her situation with clear eyes. The trading post needed to be organized, inventoried, and thoroughly cleaned if she was going to make any decisions about its future. She had just finished sweeping the main floor when the bell over the door jingled. Looking up, she saw a woman in her 40s with kind eyes and practical clothing. You must be Thomas's daughter, the woman said, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. I'm Martha Wilson. My husband and I run the general store down the street. Eliza shook the offered hand. Eliza Norwood. It's nice to meet you, Mrs. Wilson. Martha, please. The older woman looked around the trading post appraisingly. I see you're already hard at work. Trying to make sense of things, Eliza admitted. My father's record-keeping was creative, Martha laughed. That sounds like Thomas. He had a good heart but a scattered mind for business. She paused, her expression growing more serious. I hope you don't mind my asking, but do you plan to stay? I haven't decided yet. Eliza said. To be honest, I'm not sure if I can make this place profitable again. It won't be easy, Martha acknowledged. But this post serves an important purpose. We sell dry goods and sundries at our store, but Thomas specialized in trade with the ranchers and the few remaining miners. Tools, equipment, feed things we don't carry. As they talked, several other townspeople stopped by, each offering condolences and, in their own way, taking the measure of Thomas Norwood's daughter. By midday, Eliza had met the blacksmith, the saloon owner, the town's only doctor, and a half-dozen ranchers' wives who had come to town for supplies. Just after noon, the door opened again, and Yates Richmond stepped inside. Unlike the previous evening, he now wore a practical work shirt and denim trousers, with a pistol holstered at his hip. His presence filled the room in a way that made Eliza suddenly conscious of her plain work dress and hair pinned hastily at the nape of her neck. "Miss Norwood," he greeted her, touching the brim of his hat. "I brought some supplies I thought you might need." He gestured to a wagon outside where she could see several crates and a small barrel. "Mr. Richmond, that's very thoughtful, but I can't accept. It's not charity," he interrupted gently. "It's goods for your store. Beef, some hides, and a barrel of apples from my trees. We can settle on a fair price." Eliza found herself smiling despite her reservations. "I see. In that case, I'd be happy to do business with you." They spent the next hour unloading the wagon and discussing prices. Yates was patient in explaining the local economy, what goods were scarce, what people needed most, and what they could easily obtain elsewhere. "The key to making this work," he said as they finished, "is offering what folks can't get anywhere else or making it worth their while to come to you instead of traveling to larger towns." "And what would that be?" Eliza asked, genuinely curious. Yates considered her question seriously. "Your father had connections with suppliers back east that no one else here has. He could get quality goods that aren't available locally. That's valuable." As he spoke, Eliza began to see possibilities. Her father's letters had often mentioned his struggle to maintain those connections as transportation costs rose. But she had contacts in Boston friends whose families were involved in manufacturing and shipping. Perhaps she could rebuild those connections. "Thank you, Yates," she said when they had finished. "You've given me much to think about." "Will you be at the social on Saturday?" he asked unexpectedly. "Social?" "The harvest social at the church. Everyone in town attends. There's food, music, dancing." He smiled slightly. "It would be a good way for you to meet more people." The idea of a social gathering made Eliza nervous, but she recognized the wisdom in his suggestion. "I suppose I should go then." "I could escort you if you'd like," he offered, his expression carefully neutral. "Save you from having to walk there alone." Eliza felt a flutter of something unfamiliar in her chest. "That would be very kind, thank you." After Yates left, Eliza continued her inventory with renewed purpose. By late afternoon, she had a much clearer picture of the trading post's assets and liabilities. The situation wasn't as dire as she had initially feared, but it would take work to make the business profitable again. As darkness fell, she once again found herself sitting by the window, but this time her thoughts were turned toward the future rather than the past. Outside, Silver Creek was coming to life for the evening. Men and women moved along the street, heading to the saloon or to one of the few private homes where lights glowed warmly in the windows. For the first time since receiving news of her father's death, Eliza felt a spark of determination. She might not know much about the frontier, but she was her father's daughter, resourceful and intelligent. She could learn what she needed to know. And perhaps, just perhaps, she could find a place for herself in this wild, beautiful land. The next few days passed in a blur of activity as Eliza threw herself into revitalizing the trading post. She cleaned every corner, reorganized the merchandise, and pored over her father's ledgers until she began to understand the patterns of local trade. Each day brought new visitors, some curious about the Easterner who had inherited Thomas Norwood's business, others genuinely interested in what goods she might offer. Yates Richmond stopped by daily, sometimes bringing supplies, other times simply offering advice or an extra pair of hands for the heavier work. His quiet presence became something Eliza found herself looking forward to, even as she tried to maintain a professional distance. On Friday afternoon, as Eliza was arranging a display of tools near the front window, the bell above the door jingled. She looked up, expecting to see one of the now familiar faces from town, but instead found herself facing a stranger. He was expensively dressed in a tailored suit that seemed out of place in Silver Creek, with a gold watch chain draped across his vest and a derby hat in his hands. "Miss Norwood, I presume?" he said, his voice smooth and practiced. "Harold Jenkins at your service." "I represent the Western Union Mining Company, Mr. Jenkins," Eliza acknowledged with a nod. "How may I help you?" The man smiled, revealing teeth too perfect to be natural. "Actually, I believe I may be able to help you, Miss Norwood. I understand you've recently inherited this establishment, following your father's unfortunate passing. My condolences." "Thank you," Eliza replied, instantly wary of his polished manner. "Western Union Mining is expanding its operations in this region," Jenkins continued. "We're purchasing strategic properties to support our endeavors. Your trading post occupies a particularly valuable location at the crossroads of several important routes." Understanding dawned on Eliza. "You want to buy my father's business, indeed." Jenkins pulled an envelope from his inner pocket. "I'm authorized to make a very generous offer, far more than this failing business is worth in its current state." Eliza accepted the envelope, but didn't open it. "What would become of the trading post if I sold?" Jenkins waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, the building would be repurposed to serve our mining operations. Progress, Miss Norwood. The future of this territory lies in industrial development, not in these frontier relics." His gaze swept condescendingly around the trading post. Something in his tone made Eliza's spine stiffen. "I appreciate your interest, Mr. Jenkins, but I'm not ready to make any decisions about selling at this time." The man's smile didn't waver, but his eyes hardened. "I understand this is sudden. Please review our offer at your leisure. I'll return in a few days for your answer." He tipped his hat. "But I should mention, Miss Norwood, that our offer won't remain on the table indefinitely. There are other properties we could consider if this one proves unavailable." After Jenkins left, Eliza opened the envelope. The amount written on the paper inside made her breath catch. It was indeed generous enough to return to Boston and live comfortably for years. She was still staring at the figure when the bell jingled again and Yates stepped inside. "Everything all right?" he asked, noting her expression. Eliza hesitated only briefly before explaining Jenkins' visit. "It's a substantial offer," she concluded, showing him the paper. Yates whistled softly. "That's more than fair market value." "Then why do I feel like I'd be making a mistake to accept?" Yates leaned against the counter, his eyes thoughtful. "Western Union has been buying up property all over the territory. They're not just after mining claims, they want to control the towns, the supply routes, everything." "Is that so terrible?" Eliza asked. "Development brings opportunity, doesn't it?" "For some," Yates acknowledged. "But companies like Western Union don't care about the people who already live here. They bring in their own workers, set their own prices. Small ranchers like me get squeezed out. Independent businesses disappear." Eliza glanced around the trading post, seeing it with new eyes. It wasn't just a business, it was a gathering place, a lifeline for the community. "My father wouldn't have sold," she said softly. "No, he wouldn't have," Yates agreed. "But this isn't his decision to make anymore. It's yours." Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them. Eliza carefully folded the paper and placed it back in the envelope. "I should finish getting ready for the social tomorrow," she said. "You're still planning to escort me, aren't you?" Yates' expression lightened. "Wouldn't miss it for anything, Miss Norwood." Saturday evening arrived with an unexpected flurry of nerves for Eliza. She had brought only practical clothing to Montana, expecting to sort out her father's affairs quickly and return to Boston. but tucked in her trunk was one good dress, a deep blue silk that brought out the color of her eyes. She had packed it on a whim, never expecting to need it. As she fastened the tiny buttons and arranged her hair in a simple but elegant style, Eliza found herself wondering what Yates would think. The thought brought a flush to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the cool evening air. The knock came precisely at 7. Eliza opened the door to find Yates standing there, hat in hand, wearing a clean shirt and what appeared to be his best coat. His hair was freshly trimmed and he had shaved closely, revealing a strong jawline usually hidden beneath stubble. "Miss Norwood," he said, his eyes widening slightly as he took in her appearance. "You look beautiful." "Thank you," she replied, suddenly shy. "And please call me Eliza. After all you've done to help me, I think we can dispense with formalities." "Eliza," he repeated, as if testing the feel of her name. "Then you must call me Yates." He offered his arm, and she took it, feeling the solid strength beneath the worn fabric of his coat. As they walked toward the small white church at the end of the street, Eliza was acutely aware of the curious glances from townspeople they passed. Clearly, Yates Richmond escorting the newcomer was noteworthy. The church had been transformed for the occasion. Lanterns hung from the rafters, casting a warm glow over the space. The pews had been pushed to the walls, creating room for dancing in the center. Tables laden with food lined one side, while a small group of musicians tuned their instruments in the corner. Eliza. Martha Wilson called, waving them over. "I'm so glad you decided to come. And with Mr. Richmond, too," she added with a knowing glance between them. Before long, Eliza found herself introduced to nearly everyone in Silver Creek. Names and faces blurred together, but she did her best to remember details, to connect with these people who had known her father when she hadn't. The music started, and couples moved to the center of the room. Eliza watched, fascinated by the simple joy on their faces as they danced to lively folk tunes. "Would you care to dance?" Yates asked, his hand extended toward her. Eliza hesitated. "I'm afraid I don't know these dances. In Boston, our social dances were quite different." "It's not so hard," he assured her. "I'll show you." And so she found herself in his arms, laughing as he guided her through the unfamiliar steps. Yates was surprisingly graceful for such a tall man and patient with her mistakes. By the third dance, Eliza was moving with more confidence, caught up in the music and the moment. During a break in the dancing, they stepped outside for some fresh air. The night was clear, stars scattered like diamonds across the vast Montana sky. Standing in the shadow of the church, Eliza felt both very small and strangely free. "It's beautiful here," she said softly, "so different from Boston." "Do you miss it?" Yates asked. "The city, I mean." Eliza considered the question honestly. "Parts of it, the libraries, the theaters." "The familiarity of it all." She turned to look at him. "But there's something about this place. It gets under your skin, doesn't it?" Yates nodded. "That's why I stayed, came out west looking for something, not sure what, found it here." "What was it?" she asked. "What did you find?" He looked at her then, really looked at her, and Eliza felt her breath catch. "Space to breathe," he said simply. "Room to be myself without the weight of expectations. Freedom." They stood in silence for a moment, the music from inside filtering out to them. Eliza thought about Jenkins' offer, about how easy it would be to take the money and return to the comfortable life she knew in Boston. And yet, "I've been thinking about the trading post," she said. "About what it could be with some work and new connections." Yates smiled, and the sight of it warmed her more than it should have. "I was hoping you'd say something like that. It won't be easy," she warned. "I have much to learn about this place, these people." "You're a quick study," he said, his confidence in her both flattering and intimidating. "And you won't be doing it alone. People here help each other. It's how we survive." As they rejoined the social, Eliza found herself seeing the townspeople with new eyes, not as strangers but as potential friends, neighbors, allies. If she stayed, these would be her people. The thought was both terrifying and exhilarating. Later, as Yates walked her back to the trading post, a comfortable silence settled between them. At her door, he paused, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Thank you for a lovely evening," she said, filling the silence. "The pleasure was mine, Eliza." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be bringing some more supplies tomorrow if that's all right." "Of course," she replied, strangely pleased at the prospect of seeing him again so soon. "Good night, Yates." "Good night," he said softly, waiting until she was safely inside before turning to leave. Alone in the quiet trading post, Eliza moved to her familiar spot by the window. She watched Yates' tall figure disappear down the street, and for the first time since arriving in Silver Creek, she felt as if she might be exactly where she was meant to be. The next morning, Eliza woke with renewed purpose. If she was going to stay in Silver Creek, she needed to make the trading post not just viable but essential to the community. She spent the early hours writing letters to her contacts in Boston, inquiring about shipments of goods that would be hard to obtain in Montana territory. Just before noon, the bell above the door announced a visitor. Expecting Yates, Eliza looked up with a smile that quickly faded when she saw Harold Jenkins standing there instead. "Miss Norwood," he greeted her, removing his hat. "I trust you've had time to consider our generous offer." Eliza straightened her shoulders. "I have, Mr. Jenkins, and I'm afraid I must decline. This trading post is not for sale." Jenkins' polite facade slipped for just a moment, revealing something cold and calculating beneath. "I urge you to reconsider. A young woman alone in this wilderness. Life can be quite challenging, dangerous even." The implied threat was unmistakable, but Eliza refused to be intimidated. "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Jenkins, but I've made my decision. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a business to run." Jenkins replaced his hat, his movements deliberate. "This isn't over, Miss Norwood. Western Union Mining doesn't take rejection lightly." After he left, Eliza released a shaky breath. She wasn't naive enough to believe Jenkins would simply accept her refusal. Companies like Western Union were known for their ruthless tactics. But she was her father's daughter, and she wouldn't be bullied into selling his legacy. The bell jangled again, and this time it was Yates who entered, his arms full of supplies. One look at her face told him something was wrong. "What happened?" he asked, setting down his burden. Eliza explained Jenkins' visit and her refusal of his offer. "He didn't take it well," she concluded. Yates' expression darkened. "They rarely do. Western Union has been trying to control this region for years. They've bought out smaller mining operations, pressured landowners, even hired gunmen to intimidate those who won't sell." "Gunmen," Eliza echoed, a chill running down her spine. "It doesn't usually come to violence," Yates assured her, "but they're not above using pressure tactics." He hesitated, then added, "Eliza, no one would blame you if you reconsidered. That's a lot of money they're offering." "It's not about the money," she said firmly. "This was my father's place. He believed in Silver Creek and its people. I can't just sell that to a company that would destroy everything he valued." Something flickered in Yates' eyes, respect, perhaps, or something deeper. "Then we'll need to make sure you're protected. Western Union doesn't give up easily." "We?" Eliza questioned, caught by the word. "Your father was my friend," Yates said simply. "And you're—" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Important to this community now, we take care of our own." The next few weeks settled into a rhythm as Eliza threw herself into revitalizing the trading post. True to his word, Yates became her most steadfast ally, helping with repairs, advising on inventory, and introducing her to ranchers and farmers who might become regular customers. Other townspeople rallied around her as well. Martha Wilson shared her knowledge of what goods women in the area most needed. The blacksmith, a taciturn man named Daniel Forbes, helped repair the sagging shelves and reinforce the back door. Even the saloon owner, a rough-edged former prospector called Old Pete, spread the word that Thomas Norwood's daughter was continuing his business. But Western Union Mining wasn't finished with Eliza. Jenkins returned twice more, each time with a higher offer and thinly veiled warnings about the difficulties she might face if she continued to refuse. When monetary enticement failed, other troubles began. A shipment of goods she had ordered from Denver was mysteriously delayed. A rumor spread that she was planning to raise prices, causing several potential customers to shop elsewhere. One morning, she arrived at the trading post to find a window broken and some merchandise damaged. Through it all, Yates was her constant support. He began spending evenings at the trading post, often bringing dinner from the small restaurant in town or supplies from his ranch. They would sit by the window, talking long into the night about everything and nothing: his experiences as a cowboy, her life in Boston, their dreams for the future. Eliza found herself looking forward to these evenings more than she cared to admit. There was something about Yates Richmond that made her feel both protected and free, respected for her mind and desired as a woman. It was unlike anything she had experienced with the proper Boston gentleman her aunt had introduced her to. One evening in late October, as the first snow dusted the mountains in the distance, Yates arrived at the trading post with a troubled expression. "What is it?" Eliza asked, immediately concerned. "Western Union is bringing in men from outside the territory," he said, removing his hat and hanging it on the hook that had become his. "I heard it from a friend who works at the stage depot. A group arrived yesterday, hard men with guns, not miners." Eliza felt her stomach tighten with apprehension. "You think they're here because of me, because I won't sell?" "It's possible," Yates admitted. "Western Union has interests all over the territory, but the timing is suspicious." "What should I do?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Yates crossed to her, taking her hands in his. His were rough with calluses, warm and strong around her smaller ones. "You don't have to face this alone, Eliza. The town is behind you. I'm behind you." She looked up at him, seeing the concern in his eyes, but also something else, a tenderness that made her heart beat faster. "I'm not afraid," she said, surprising herself with the truth of it. "Not when you're here." Something shifted between them in that moment. Yates raised one hand to gently touch her cheek, his fingers rough against her skin. "Eliza," he said, her name a question and a prayer. She answered by rising on her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, a meeting of two people who had been circling each other for weeks. Then Yates' arms went around her, pulling her close against the solid warmth of his chest, and the kiss deepened into something that stole her breath and made her forget everything but the feel of him. When they finally broke apart, Eliza felt as if something fundamental had changed within her. She had never been the type of woman to throw caution to the wind, yet here she was, falling for a cowboy in a frontier town, standing firm against powerful enemies. "I should go," Yates said reluctantly, his hands still resting lightly on her waist. "It's getting late." "Stay," Eliza heard herself say. I mean, just for a while longer. I don't want to be alone tonight." They sat together by the window as they had so many evenings before, but now Yates' arm was around her shoulders, her head resting against him. They talked in low voices about what might come next, about the trading post, about the future neither of them had planned but both now wanted. "Whatever happens," Yates promised as the hour grew late, "we'll face it together." It was a promise he would be called upon to keep sooner than either of them expected. The confrontation came 3 days later, on a gray afternoon that threatened snow. Eliza was alone in the trading post, organizing a new shipment of goods that had finally arrived from Denver, when the bell above the door announced visitors. She looked up to see Jenkins enter, followed by 2 men whose hard eyes and worn gun belts marked them clearly as hired muscle. "Miss Norwood," Jenkins said, his tone falsely pleasant. "I've come with a final offer from Western Union Mining." Eliza straightened, pushing aside the fear that threatened to paralyze her. "As I've told you repeatedly, Mr. Jenkins, the trading post is not for sale." Jenkins sighed theatrically. "I was afraid you might say that, which is why I brought some associates to help explain the situation." He nodded to the men behind him. Mr. Donovan and Mr. Burke have a way of making even the most stubborn individuals see reason. The larger of the two men, Donovan, presumably stepped forward, his hand resting casually on his holstered pistol. "Lady, you don't want to make this difficult. Take the money and leave town. Otherwise, accidents happen. Are you threatening me?" Eliza asked, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Just stating facts," Donovan replied with a cold smile. "Frontier towns are dangerous places. Buildings catch fire, people get hurt. Best to take the smart option while it's still available." The door opened again, the bell's cheerful jingle at odds with the tension in the room. Yates stepped inside, his expression hardening as he took in the scene. "Everything all right here, Eliza?" he asked, moving to stand beside her. "Mr. Richmond," Jenkins acknowledged with a thin smile. "This doesn't concern you. Miss Norwood and I are conducting business." "Looks more like intimidation to me," Yates replied evenly. "And anything that concerns Miss Norwood concerns me." Donovan turned to face Yates, his hand still hovering near his gun. "You might want to walk away, Cowboy." "This isn't your fight." "I'm making it my fight," Yates said, his voice calm but his eyes hard as flint. "And I'm not alone." As if on cue, the door opened again. Daniel Forbes, the blacksmith, entered, his massive arms crossed over his chest. Behind him came old Pete from the saloon, and then Martha Wilson's husband, and 3 ranchers Eliza recognized as regular customers. Within minutes, the trading post was filled with townspeople, all standing silently, a united front against the Western Union men. Jenkins looked around, his composure faltering for the first time. "What is this?" "This is Silver Creek," Yates said simply, "and we protect our own." The hired guns exchanged glances, clearly reassessing the situation. They were outnumbered, and while they might have been willing to intimidate a lone woman, facing down an entire town was a different matter. "Mr. Jenkins," Eliza said into the tense silence, "I think it's time for you and your associates to leave. Please inform Western Union that this trading post is not for sale, not now, not ever." For a moment, Jenkins looked as if he might argue, but a quick glance at the resolute faces surrounding him changed his mind. "Western Union will remember this defiance," he warned, backing toward the door. "All of you. And we'll remember who stood with us and who against us," the blacksmith rumbled. "Now get." After Jenkins and his men had gone, the townspeople lingered, their relief palpable. Martha Wilson was the first to speak. "Well, that was exciting," she said, her practical tone breaking the tension. "I think this calls for a celebration. Old Pete, don't you have some of that good whiskey you've been saving?" What followed was an impromptu gathering as the trading post filled with laughter and conversation. Someone brought food from the restaurant, and old Pete did indeed produce several bottles of surprisingly fine whiskey. As Eliza moved among her neighbors, for she now thought of them that way, she was overwhelmed by their support, their acceptance of her as one of them. Later, as the celebration wound down and people began to leave, Yates found her by the window where she had sat that first evening. "You were amazing today," he said, his voice soft with admiration. "Standing up to those men, not backing down." "I had help," Eliza reminded him, looking around at the few remaining townspeople. "I never expected. In Boston, neighbors barely acknowledge each other. Here, they risk themselves for someone they barely know." "That's the frontier for you," Yates said with a smile. "Out here, you depend on each other. It's how you survive." He paused, his expression growing more serious. "Eliza, there's something I need to tell you." "What is it?" she asked, noting the sudden intensity in his eyes. "I've been thinking a lot about the future, about what I want." He took her hands in his touch gentle but certain. "I came west looking for a place to belong and I found it here, but these past weeks I've realized that it's not just about the place, it's about the people, it's about you." Eliza's heart thundered in her chest. "Yates." "I know it hasn't been long," he continued. "And I know you have a life back in Boston that I can't compete with, but I love you, Eliza Norwood. I think I started falling for you that first night when you opened your door to a stranger because he knew your father." Tears pricked at Eliza's eyes. "I don't want to go back to Boston," she whispered. "My life is here now, with the trading post, with you." Yates' face lit with a joy that took her breath away. "Does that mean—" "I love you too," Eliza said, the words feeling right, feeling true. "I didn't come here looking for love, but I found it anyway. In this wild place with a cowboy who knocked on my door and asked to sit a while." He kissed her then, in front of the few remaining townspeople, who responded with good-natured cheers and catcalls. Eliza found she didn't mind. This was her community now, these were her people, and Yates Richmond was the man she loved. As winter settled over Silver Creek, bringing deep snow and bitter cold, the trading post became a center of community life. Eliza implemented many of the ideas she and Yates had discussed, expanding inventory to include goods that couldn't be found elsewhere in the territory, offering fair credit to ranchers during the lean months, creating a small reading area with newspapers and books from back east. Western Union Mining made no further attempts to purchase the property. Whether it was the united front the town had presented or simply that they had moved on to easier targets, Eliza couldn't say. But the threat of their return no longer kept her awake at night. Instead, her thoughts were filled with plans for her future with Yates. They spent every evening together, sometimes at the trading post, sometimes at his small ranch outside of town. Eliza learned to ride, to care for livestock, to appreciate the harsh beauty of Montana in winter. Yates, in turn, developed a taste for the books she loved, listening intently as she read aloud by lamplight on snowy evenings. Their courtship progressed with a speed that would have scandalized Boston society, but seemed perfectly natural in the context of frontier life, where hardship and distance made people value genuine connection above social convention. On Christmas Eve, with the trading post decorated with pine boughs and the small stove radiating welcome heat, Yates asked Eliza to marry him. It was not a grand proposal, just the two of them, sitting by the window where they had first truly connected, his grandmother's ring simple but beautiful in the lamplight. "Yes," Eliza said without hesitation, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "Yes, I will marry you, Yates Richmond." They were wed on New Year's Day, 1877, in the small white church where they had danced at the harvest social. The entire town turned out for the occasion, filling the church to capacity despite the bitter cold outside. Eliza wore her blue silk dress, and Yates a new suit ordered specially from Denver. Martha Wilson stood as Eliza's matron of honor, and Daniel the blacksmith as Yates' best man. After the ceremony, the celebration moved to the saloon, where old Pete had cleared the gaming tables to make room for food and dancing. As Eliza and Yates took the floor for their first dance as husband and wife, she couldn't help but reflect on how dramatically her life had changed in just a few months. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "That I never expected to find happiness here," she admitted. "When I first arrived, all I could see was what this place lacked compared to Boston. Now all I can see is how much it has that Boston never did." "And what's that?" he asked, his arms warm around her as they moved to the music. "Freedom," she said, echoing his words from that night outside the church. "Room to breathe, to be myself without the weight of expectations." She smiled up at him. "And you, Boston never had you." Spring came to Silver Creek in a rush of melting snow and mud, followed by an explosion of wildflowers across the hills. With the warmer weather came new opportunities as travelers and traders who had been snowbound all winter made their way to town. The trading post thrived under Eliza's careful management. Her contacts in Boston proved invaluable, providing access to goods that would otherwise be unavailable in the territory. Yates divided his time between his ranch and helping at the store, the two of them building both businesses with an eye toward the future. That future became even more precious in late April, when Eliza discovered she was expecting a child. The news brought Yates to his knees, his hands gentle on her still flat stomach, his eyes shining with wonder and love. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." Martha Wilson took it upon herself to ensure Eliza had everything she needed during her pregnancy, sharing wisdom gained from raising 4 children of her own. The women of Silver Creek rallied around their newest member, bringing gifts of baby clothes and practical advice, while the men offered Yates congratulations and good-natured teasing about sleepless nights to come. As summer ripened toward fall, Eliza found herself once again sitting by the window of the trading post in the evening light. Her body had changed, rounded with the child she carried, but her heart was as full as her belly. Outside, Silver Creek bustled with activity, miners coming down from the hills, cowboys riding in from distant ranches, families going about their evening routines. The bell above the door jingled and Yates entered, his face lighting at the sight of her. He crossed to where she sat, bending to kiss her before placing a gentle hand on her stomach. "How are my girls today?" he asked, having convinced himself they were having a daughter despite Eliza's insistence that it was too soon to know. "We're perfect," she replied, covering his hand with her own. "Just waiting for you to come home." "Home," Yates repeated, the word full of meaning. He sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders as they watched the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. "Did I ever tell you that I used to ride by this window sometimes, before your father died? I'd see him sitting here in the evenings, looking out at the town, and I'd think how lonely he seemed." Eliza leaned her head against his shoulder. "I wish I had come sooner, been here with him." "He knew you loved him," Yates assured her. "And he'd be so proud of what you've done with this place, of who you've become." They sat in comfortable silence as darkness fell and the first stars appeared in the vast Montana sky. Eliza thought about the long journey that had brought her here, not just the physical distance from Boston to Silver Creek, but the emotional journey from grief to love, from uncertainty to purpose. "I never thanked you," she said suddenly. "For what?" Yates asked, his fingers playing idly with a strand of her hair. "For knocking on my door that first night, for asking to sit a while." She turned to look at him, this man who had become her world. "If you hadn't, I might have left, gone back to Boston, missed all of this." Yates smiled, the same smile that had first warmed her heart months ago. "Then I guess we both owe a debt to your father. He always said a person who's grieving needs company, not solitude." He placed his hand gently over her rounded belly. "And now none of us will ever be alone again." Their daughter, Margaret Thomas Richmond, was born on a crisp November morning just as the first snow of the season began to fall. She had her father's gray eyes and her mother's determined spirit, announcing her arrival with lusty cries that made Dr. Wilson chuckle as he placed her in Eliza's arms. "She's perfect," Yates whispered, his voice thick with emotion as he gazed down at his wife and child. "Absolutely perfect." In the years that followed, Silver Creek grew and changed. The silver mines eventually played out completely, but unlike many boom towns that became ghost towns, Silver Creek adapted. Ranching became the backbone of the local economy, supplemented by trade and small-scale farming. The railroad arrived in 1881, bringing new opportunities and challenges. Through it all, the trading post remained a constant, evolving to meet the community's needs under Eliza and Yates' thoughtful stewardship. They added a second story to the building, creating a proper home above the store where they raised Margaret and later, her 2 brothers. Western Union Mining eventually abandoned its efforts in the region, forced out by a combination of depleted silver deposits and resistance from locals, who had learned the value of standing together. Jenkins never returned to Silver Creek, though occasionally news of the company's activities elsewhere would reach them. On crisp fall evenings, when the day's work was done and the children were asleep, Eliza and Yates would often sit together by the window that had become their special place. Sometimes they would talk about the future plans for the trading post, dreams for their children, ideas for the ranch. Other times they would simply sit in comfortable silence, watching the life of the town unfold before them. And on those quiet nights, Eliza would often think about how a single moment, a knock on a door, an invitation to sit a while had changed the course of her life. How grief had led to love, and how a place she had never wanted to be had become the only place she ever wanted to be. In 1901, 25 years after Eliza had first arrived in Silver Creek, the town celebrated its founding with a grand festival that drew people from all over the territory, now the state of Montana. The trading post, expanded and modernized but still recognizably the same building, was decorated with banners proclaiming it the oldest continuous business in town. Eliza, her hair now streaked with silver but her blue eyes as bright as ever, stood beside Yates, his tall frame still straight and strong despite the years of hard work. Their children were grown now, Margaret married to a local rancher's son, Thomas studying law in Helena, and young William helping his father run the ranch while showing a keen interest in the trading post as well. As the celebration wound down and twilight settled over Silver Creek, Eliza and Yates returned to their familiar spot by the window. The town had changed. Wooden sidewalks had replaced the mud paths, electric lights now competed with the stars. Automobiles occasionally rattled down the street alongside horses and wagons. But the essence of the place remained the same, a community of people bound together by shared experiences and mutual support. 25 years, Yates marveled, his hand finding hers as naturally as breathing. Sometimes it feels like yesterday that I knocked on your door. And sometimes it feels like I've been here forever, Eliza replied, leaning against him. Like there was never a time when I didn't love this place, when I didn't love you. Outside, the last of the festival goers made their way home, calling good nights to each other in the gathering darkness. Inside, in the warm circle of lamplight, Eliza and Yates Richmond sat together by the window, watching over the town they had helped build, secure in the knowledge that what they had created both in their family and in their community would endure long after they were gone. And as night fell completely over Silver Creek, Eliza thought once more of that first evening, when grief and loneliness had been her only companions until a cowboy knocked softly and asked to sit a while. How strange and wonderful that the simplest acts of kindness could lead to such profound happiness. How grateful she was that she had opened her door that night, opened her heart to this man, this place, this unexpected life that had become more precious to her than anything she could have imagined. "I love you," she whispered to Yates, the words as true now as they had been when first spoken all those years ago. "And I love you," he replied, his arms tightening around her, "now and always." Together they sat by the window, watching over their town, their legacy, their love, a love born of grief and kindness, tested by adversity, and strengthened by years of shared joys and sorrows. A love as vast and enduring as the Montana sky, as steadfast as the mountains that cradled their valley, as true as the North Star that had guided travelers home for generations. A love that had begun with a simple question and an open door, and had grown into a life neither of them could have dreamed of, but both had helped create, day by day, year by year together.